Hello, everyone. Welcome to this AI briefing and recording, a live recording, a live virtual audience. Apologies for the bongs in the background. My competence has extended to discovering the secret of tone of voice in AI, but it definitely draws the line at ever making video conference work flawlessly. So we're going to press on. As usual, the format for this is a 20-minute briefing followed by questions and answers. So if you have any thoughts, questions, please do put them in the chat, save them, or they'll be picked up by my colleagues Harriet and Stephanie, who are helping me on this call. But today we're talking about why AI doesn't sound like you. This sounds like, depending on when you're coming from, either the biggest problem in the world or a kind of interesting puzzle, an interesting side puzzle, but it's actually a question that we think start trying to answer it, gives us insights into how we can answer lots and lots of complex problems when it comes to AI. So it's a problem that we recognize coming from the marketing space, but one that we maybe don't recognize as much elsewhere. It's also a problem that we put up with a lot when we think we've got something that kind of helps but doesn't quite work. So it tells us a lot of interesting things about AI. Let's get into it. So first of all, tone of voice is how your personality comes through in language. The key distinction: one voice, many tones. The voice, who you are, stays constant. The tone flexes by who you're talking to and when. And I have a really helpful infographic here, which you're free to screenshot or dwell on over time. But this is the theory of how a tone of voice is made. The thing about tone of voice is that it's kind of complex to make. It's complex to write down. I'm the kind of word nerd who loves to read a style guide. I love the Economist style guide. My absolute favorite style guide in the world is written by Benjamin Dreyer. It's called Dreyer's English, and there are English and American editions of it. He's the chief copy editor at Random House and extremely exacting. His editing is all about raising the quality of the copy, regardless of voice. But tone of voice is something that we care about when either we're writing for ourselves and we don't want to sound like a robot or AI, or more commonly, when we're dealing with clients' issues, it's to do with a brand's tone of voice or an organization's tone of voice if it's the communications department. So there's lots of stuff that goes into it, and some tone of voice guides are extremely long, some are extremely beautiful, and there's lots of effort goes into them, and then they tend to be ignored except by the people who care about it most: the gatekeepers, the quality checkers, the creative directors, the heads of comms, who want things to sound right. So it all sounds quite straightforward to the layperson and extremely complex to the expert. That's the thing about tone of voice. And actually, that's the first clue as to why not only is this interesting as a puzzle in itself, but as a kind of a pattern or a guide to how you solve or work on really tough expert problems, things that involve taste or deep domain knowledge in different areas. And AI struggles with it because AI, and we're talking about generative AI, we're talking about LLMs, the main way that people fix it, the main way that we go out and fix it, is to describe to the AI with as best a prompt as we can come up with how we want the tone of voice to sound. If we're maybe taking it a little bit a level further, we might load our tone of voice into the prompt and say, this is our tone of voice. And if the AI has a large enough context window, if it's the right kind of, that will help. But it doesn't always get it right. And why it struggles with it is all to do with basically the underlying thing that AI does. AI is a kind of an averaging machine, really, when it comes up with a voice or an answer. As you may remember, if you've had this explained before, the AI wants to please. It wants to come up with a plausible response to things. And so it will look at the possibility space, really, the idea of a kind of a big, these are all the possible answers I could give to this question, and this is the probably the best answer that I could come up with. But unfortunately, for people who care about voice and tone, that most plausible means the most accurate, which is why things can often sound American, because a lot of the tone of voice is trained on American content. It's why certain words kind of get stuck in the system, certain styles get stuck in the system, like M dashes, or I don't know what your pet hate is as a word. My pet hate is quietly at the moment, but I don't know whether that's an AI thing or whether it's that's just how everybody in culture is describing everything. As in, an AI model last night quietly launched a new edition. It didn't do it quietly. It was very, very loud, but everything on LinkedIn and everything in social seems to talk about things happening quietly. I may have included a few quietlies later on as Easter eggs in this presentation. So how do we escape that average trap there? You can see, like, in the center there, that's the average, and we're way out on the edge with a brand voice. We're not just professional and funny, we want to be really distinct and really like in a place that communicates who we are and the way that we want to talk. So that comes down to taste a lot, and we've heard a lot about taste around AI. So what we did, Brilliant Noise, was we were asked this question by clients again a couple of weeks ago, and we had our points of view, we had our approaches to it, but we thought we would use some of the new AI models out there to help us do more in-depth research into what's going on. So we looked across and gathered examples of people's accounts and examples of people's prompts and tools from lots of different professions. We looked at journalism, PR, fiction, especially genre fiction, that's like romance and fantasy, who kind of write at volume, and brand copywriting, and asked, what are people doing here to try and get their tone of voice right? And of course, you've got people selling tools that do it, you've got people selling expertise that can help you do it, and then you've got people just talking about how they're doing it as professionals. And picking up all of this, we kind of evaluated what evidence people had for their method works, because you can have a method that you think works, but of course taste is subjective, and AI's responses are highly variable. And we arrived at a kind of a framework of 7 approaches where we could see how people were trying to get things more accurate, and then we graded each of those approaches to see how accurate they actually were at producing a consistent tone of voice for a brand. And these are these 7, or it might be, yeah, there are some. So these are the 7, and really the most common one that people use, as we say, is describing it in a prompt. So saying we are professional, we are funny, we are don't take ourselves too seriously, and that is the least effective way of doing it. And that, I'm being completely frank, that surprised us, because it's kind of a head fake. You're used to being able to describe things to AI in order to get better results, but it doesn't seem to work as well in this instance. You get closer, but nowhere near close enough. The next thing was to show it, was to give it an example of what it was that you're trying to get to, and then getting really detailed into specifying it and giving it a tone of voice guide, getting into a lot of detail about the tone of voice. But that's not what most people do in a prompt. It's sometimes what they do by adding in a tone of voice guide. Then we went through this persisting it, which is like basically keeping the same kind of data and prompt and context across different things, which again, not many people do, surprisingly few do. Grounding it in a context, so giving it like a GPT or a bot or a recurring system, and then learning lessons, and obviously like policing it with a kind of human or some kind of a test at the end. So of those, it was just really, really interesting that describing it was the least effective. And to sound distinct, you have to what we call just for fun, call it de-average the model. Like how words don't give it enough context, don't give AI enough context to sway it away from being really, really average. And here's a kind of a diagram to express that. When I say that something is punchy, when I say something is professional, and I say something is wry, I'm thinking, because I'm an economist, I'm thinking of The Economist. That's, it's professional. They really managed to land points early on in the articles, and there is a kind of a wryness, a kind of dry jokingness to their copy. But to someone else, that might be Jeremy Clarkson. Which would not be the tone of voice that I'm going for. For someone else, punchy, dry, and professional might be their favorite author, their favorite brand, whatever. Those words mean something to me, but actually they mean different things to a lot of people. So again, I'm giving the model a steer, but it's not much of a steer, because all of those words have an average, which may be a long, long way away from mine. I thought I really wanted to, this wasn't part of the overall evidence, but it's something that came out from then testing it, which I'll get into in a moment. This idea of overfitting, which is not a term that I'd used before. And I'll admit it's one that the AI came up with. Maybe it means something to you, but it means a lot to me now that I've thought about it, so I wanted to share it. So show, don't tell is a great tactic, giving it good examples, bad examples, especially giving it a contrast between those two things. It's something we do instinctively in style guides, both visually and when we're writing it down. So a lot of style guides will have this in, but maybe not enough of those examples to make a difference to AI. Because if I show, and I've done this testing, we're doing this testing at Brilliant Noise, but I've also done it for my own newsletter. So I'm not publishing what the AI is writing, but I'm using it to compare what it comes up with my voice. And when I only give it a couple of articles for it to draw on, as in this is right, then it overfits from that pattern. So I gave my AI a newsletter where I talked about a journey into a cave in France, and I'd used that as a metaphor for some other things going on in AI. I was feeling very literally, it was the summer holidays, what can you do? But what it did then was, in all of the outputs it kind of got closer to my tone of voice, but kept going on about caves and metaphors and journeys into the unknown. It was overfitting. It was overemphasizing those things. I'd also been a little bit sarcastic in an opening paragraph. I know me, and it took that tone and ran with it all the time. So everything it ended up sounding like a kind of an NME article or just a really horrible critical review, where people try to prove how clever they are by being sneery about things. And that's not something I want to do in my tone of voice. So show but don't overfit. Overfitting happens when you've not given it enough examples. So we tested this on our own articles on the website. What we did was we took combinations of different tactics from that. I'll just flip back to that table, which we'll send around to everybody who's been on this call. But we took different elements of this and tested them to see what gave us the best results in terms of writing articles which we'd already written, but from a raw brief. And also kind of then looked at them and got a kind of an independent AI model to judge them and come in. It was, I'm afraid, the much mourned now Fable 5, the Claude model, which was withdrawn on Friday, because this was last week that we were doing the testing. It is insanely good, but I won't go on about it. I'm just feeling a lot of loss right now. These are the results from the testing. What you can see there is the kind of the patterns of the scoring that came up from using different tactics. So adjectives very much gave us an average. I love this. When we talk about getting things right with tone of voice, we'd say feel, or we say taste, or smell, and smell was it smells right, or it comes up with things. It was spotting lots and lots of ticks, lots and lots of things that were to give away as AI rather than human. So the adjectives kind of did not get us further away from average, did not give us a high enough score. Giving it pairs of good, bad, improved things and got things into a narrower frame. Giving it a good spec was fine, but the spec without the pairs, without lots of different examples, kind of degraded it as well. But putting it all into a stack and using them all at once gave us the best results. It gave us things that were actually really close to perfect. That said, they weren't perfect. And I think the conclusion we've come from this is what AI can do is remove a lot of the difficult work of putting together a piece of writing in a certain tone of voice, but it can never get you all the way there. And certainly if you're, there is a lot, I wouldn't use this for articles where you're writing to think, but where you're writing functionally for something like a press release or for a report or something, and you want it in a tone of voice, then these sorts of techniques are really, really useful. So I know a lot of people will have used prompts to try and affect the tone of voice of an AI. I think where we get to is that you shouldn't think of this as having a really good prompt. You should think of this as having a tone of voice system that you prompt. So you need to build a system that's going to have some examples, and you can do this in a ChatGPT project or in a Claude project, or use a GPT or a skill, whatever kind of level of AI you're comfortable with, or just having a big pack of context to load into a prompt. But you need to pay attention to that. It's not something just to throw together. You've got to go, this is my tone of voice. These are the good and bad examples. These are lots of examples of things that have gone right or wrong. But it needs to be a system that you go back around and improve. So when it's not getting things right, it can learn by you going in or asking the AI system itself to rewrite your instructions to it, to say, I need you to be a bit more like this. I need you to put a label on that. And this is where the parallel comes in for we think a lot of things, and why we think that although we were really interested in this challenge of tone of voice, actually what all knowledge professionals, what all creative professionals are doing is making lots and lots and lots of decisions. And what success looks like in the age of AI is making fewer high quality decisions and spending more time on the things that really count and that can sway things. What frustrates a lot of us is when we're getting rubbish through from AI, or even worse now, rubbish through from colleagues or partner agencies that are sending us stuff that's just too obviously wrong. So shrinking the decision space means taking it through a system or a stack, if you like, of these different things of data, of specifications, and of like things that you want and that you don't want. And I think that's going to be a very similar pattern to lots of things, not just tone of voice. So that's a way of thinking about it. So the practical takeaway, though, if you're just here for tone of voice, this is what we recommend. And please do. I think we have a link coming up where you can ask for some more details and more on the research, and also on the application of it. But the practical takeaway is that there are kind of three things that you want to do. You want to shrink that decision space before you're generating things. So you want to be giving the AI a good amount of context. You want to be consistent with that context across different pieces and be improving it. So it's like your kit that you're taking along from job to job. Now, either that's living in a folder, or it's living in a set of markdown files or plain text files that you can keep bringing to your prompts, or you're building some sort of system that you're comfortable with in terms of AI. But that's going to shrink the decision space, but not eliminate it. So that's kind of not being frustrated that it's not getting the tone of voice right, but it being interested in where it's getting it close and how you can improve the next time. Because if you've got that feedback loop and you're showing it the edits you're making and you're showing it where it got it wrong, it can help you to label what those differences are. But so far, all of these things do not stack up to perfection. And we see perfection being claimed. We found especially some of the large ad agency groups claiming that they had models that they tuned that could do this, but we see very little evidence that people are able to produce tone of voice that's consistently good again and again. So it's kind of down to us as professionals to build our own systems for doing this, or our systems in our teams or for our clients. And that is our 20 minutes on tone of voice. Do just get in touch with us. I'm very happy to send you some supporting materials from this, including the research and how to do it yourself.